Back in the basement working on my XR today. Got a whole bunch of new parts in for the rear shock. I'm going to start putting it back together. Before I start putting it back together, I did notice a few things though that still need to be cleaned up a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first. Just a little bit of a burr here on this cap. I'm going to clean it a little better and then set it with some sandpaper. Another one right there. Okay, now the last thing I want to do is give a real quick rinse to all these parts in this shim stack here. They've kind of got some dust and grit from sitting around a little bit. You don't need a real good cleaning, but just enough to get that off. Okay, that's all of those shims cleaned up. Next thing I want to do is try and replace this piston ring. So I'm going to carefully try and transfer this half of the shims over to this screwdriver without losing the order. That worked pretty good. I can pull this piston ring out. It looks like this squared side goes towards these bigger shims, and this kind of more rounded off side goes towards these smaller shims. I'm going to try and get under this thing with a pick and see what happens. Close, but not quite what I need. Okay, there we go. Looks like there was another O-ring in there that I didn't even know about, but it seems to be in good condition still, and I don't think I damaged it pulling that this piston ring out, so I think we should be good to reuse it. Okay, we got our new piston ring here. I believe this wasn't listed on the Honda parts diagram, so here's the actual part number from KYB. Okay, I've got the new piston ring in some really hot water that I got from the sink. I'm just going to let it soak, heat it up a little bit, hopefully make it a little more pliable before I try and push it onto this piston here. Well, since I shot the last clip last night, the power went out, so I'm trying this again tonight. I got some really hot water out of the sink. Got this new piston ring sitting in the bowl, heating up. Hopefully it'll make it more pliable. Should make it easier to get it on this shock piston. Okay, this part's been soaking in the hot water for a little bit now. I'm going to try and get it on this piston ring. Alright. Right, the first things that go back on the shock shaft are going to be the seat for the bump stop, then the bump stop itself, and then the end casing for the shock. Wow, look at the difference between those two parts. That is incredible. I think somebody put the wrong part back on this bike at one point, because that does not even look like the same shape as the new one. Interesting. Okay, next what I have here, this is what Honda calls the rod guide case. There's a special tool with kind of a taper, kind of like a fork bullet, that's supposed to go over the shock shaft to slide it on there. But it didn't really look like it was going to be very easy to get, so I tried to make my own with my 3D printer. The surface finish on this isn't the greatest, so I'm going to hit it with some sandpaper first and try and smooth it out, and I'll give it a test. The smaller end of this piece is just barely too small to fit in the 1/2-inch chuck on my drill, so that's kind of disappointing. That would have made cleaning this up a lot easier. Okay, I'm reasonably happy with how this is turning out now. Most of the texture's gone. I wasn't super worried about the layer lines, although they are pretty much gone at this point, but what I was more worried about was the staggered Z-seam. Everywhere a layer started, there was a little, almost like a little spiky from where the extruder first started spitting out the filament, and so I kind of left it with a rough, almost like scaly kind of texture, but that's all gone now, so I don't have any worry about that scraping up against the seal as it goes on here. I got some fresh soapy water in the ultrasonic cleaner. I'm going to throw this part in just to get rid of any of that dust from sanding it off. Don't want that floating around in my shock oil. Okay, the ultrasonic cleaner just finished up. I'm going to pull this out. It's hot. Well, that is one nice looking and feeling part. I'm ready to give it a try. It fits really good over that shock shaft. I'm happy with that. Okay, I got some fork oil. I'm just going to lube it up a little bit. That could be an issue. Alright, so something I neglected when I was designing this part is that the steel inner part of this rod guide case is actually the same inner diameter as this seal. So although the seal will stretch over the flared end of this, the actual steel inner part won't. So this won't actually work how I was hoping, similar to the way a fork bullet would. But I think what I can do is I'm actually going to push this through the opposite way. There we go. And now I'm going to slide this on like this, and then this should at least give me relatively the same OD as this shock shaft, so that I can slide this down without worrying about catching the seal on the edge of it. That worked pretty good. Better than I expected, actually. Okay, the next thing that's got to go onto this shock shaft is this washer and this stopper and the compression valves. Okay, now that all the compression valves are on, the piston ring itself needs to go on. And finally the rebound valves need to go on. Okay, Honda says this end nut needs to be replaced every time. Mine was pretty well destroyed anyway, so I got a new one here. I'm gonna go ahead and put it on. These threads aren't quite going on cleanly, and I've cleaned them up, or at least tried to, as well as I can. So I'm gonna go take this out to the vise, put it on there. Okay, the next thing that the manual says to do is put some suspension lube on the shock shaft. Check that this rod guide case moves freely as it should. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Yep, seems to me like it moves pretty good. There's a few little marks right in here. I don't even know if the camera will pick those up. There, maybe you can see now, right in here. Just a few little marks from the screwdriver when I took the stopper ring out. I'm going to hit those with something like 3000 grit sandpaper real quick just to try and clean them up. Okay, so the next step is to put some of the suspension oil in here to lube it all up and try and put this damper rod back into the casing. Now hopefully this thing will just slide right in and not give me any trouble. But we'll see if that actually happens. Oh, that wasn't too bad once it got started. This rod guide case is fighting me going the rest of the way in. It's moving a little bit. Ugh. There it goes. Well, just as soon as I turned the camera off, I gave it a little more push the same way I did before, and it slid right in. So that's good. Next step is going to be to put the stopper rings in. These unfortunately seem to be unavailable from the parts store I was buying parts from, so I'm going to reuse them. They look to be in good enough condition. That looks like the natural colored one with this slightly smaller diameter goes in this main area here, and this black one with the slightly larger diameter goes where the reservoir is. It's going to be the larger, slightly deeper groove that this goes in. A little more needs to go in. Aha! Right, that just clicked into place. Looks like it's fully seated now. Okay, back with the dead blow. Okay, that is back together. Next thing I'm going to do here is put this valve stem core into the reservoir cap. Okay, I can go ahead and put the bladder on. Right, now this bladder should just slide right on here. Actually, now that I think about this, I'm going to take the cap or the valve stem out, just so that there's no air in there getting compressed while I put this bladder on. Then I'll put it back in once I have the bladder attached. Okay, let me try this again. Just working it around, or at least trying to. Almost. There it goes. Alright, that's on. I'll put this valve cord back in. Okay, that bladder is all set. And give it a little more oil around the outside, and then it should be ready to go back into the shock body. Push this down in here. Go a little crooked. There we go. It should go down just a little bit more. Okay. Now it's down far enough to expose that stopper ring groove, I'll go ahead and put the stopper ring in. There we go, that's starting to go. And that looks like it is in all the way. I'm just going to pull it back out to where it should seat with this tool. Okay, so I started off with using this one while it was deeper down in there. I threaded it on. I was able to get 2 screwdrivers in at an angle like this at opposite ends. Just kind of pry up till it got to a certain height. Then the screwdriver started hitting this cap rather than the body. So then I took this one out and I switched over to this one so that rather than prying underneath to pull this up, we had these little arms a little bit further up that kind of stick out past. I threaded this on a few threads, and then once again, screwdriver here, screwdriver here. And these 2 cross arms just allowed me to get more of an upward angle so that I was pulling up on the shock body itself rather than this reservoir cap, as opposed to prying underneath with the old one where I couldn't get up any higher. So now that cap is all the way seated, and really the only thing left on this shock, at least that I can do now, is to fill it up with oil and then put the damping adjuster back in here. According to the Honda repair manual, it should be enough to fill the shock at an angle with oil, then pump it slowly to bleed the air out of it. Unfortunately, that didn't really work out for me. I decided to leave the damping adjuster out of the shock body, and I just took it to the shop who was going to do their nitrogen refill for me. According to him, the method in the Honda manual isn't really sufficient for bleeding all of the air out of the shock. In addition, he wanted to take it back apart and inspect everything before performing any work on it. After that, he hooked it up to his vacuum bleeder machine and then recharged the nitrogen. It was a little frustrating not being able to complete the work myself, but everything did work out in the end. The bike felt great, shock worked good, and I was still able to ride on my next trip the weekend after these clips were filmed. Please subscribe and keep an eye out for the next video where I put the shock back on and reassemble the rest of the bike.